Before we start, I wanted to read something. I got a email last night from Eric Eshelman. I'm not sure where Eric is. I know he's a good friend of yours, and he really wanted to be here. But this is what he said. He said, everybody thinks it's easy, especially with Scottie. They think he plays great every shot, every hole, every tournament. It's simply not the case. How do you handle it when Scottie is having a bad day? 5 hours is a long time to be out there. The waters can be very choppy. How do you help him get to the smooth seas? Ted is truly a special person. He's going to be very well received. Best always, Eric. And I don't know how many of you know Eric. If you're a member here and you play golf, you know him. But he's become quite, I can't think of a better word, but he's become quite famous as a teaching pro. So I thought you might enjoy hearing those words, and you as well. I'm going to talk and ask some questions about golf to start with, and then we will shift, and I've got some questions to ask Ted about his faith. And so I wanted to make this comment. When I was a young boy growing up here, I'm almost 72, so we're talking about 60 years ago, there was a caddy house behind the clubhouse. And they had all these men show up and to caddy for members. I guess carts were not as popular then. And, I couldn't figure out exactly what the caddy did other than carry the bag. He might rake the sand trap or hold the pin. But that's all I knew. I didn't feel like it took real special skill to be a caddy. But when you look at caddies on the tour, it really does seem to require a lot of skill. And, I just would love to hear about your responsibility as Scottie Scheffler's caddy.
Thank you guys for having me. Whoa, this thing's loud. That's pretty good. First of all, Claude, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And, you asked me if I agree with you on my humility. Absolutely. Very humble man. Matter of fact, I've been telling people for years how humble I am. It's a God-given talent. I'm just better at it than most people. You did mention an Olympic medal, so if you don't hold this for just a second here, please just wear this in honor of you guys here. Just, some of you guys. Thank you guys. Just want to get a little nervous here. Let me just get a drink real quick from my special cup that I brought. Let's get a little. That's good. That's good quality water here in Birmingham, Alabama. Let me tell you what, you guys are amazing. So, all in fun, but that is the claret jug. If people want to get a picture afterwards, Scottie Scheffler honored us and let us take it here. So, a lot of fun. But caddying is a hard business. A lot of my friends are like, man, I love to caddy. People text me all the time or DM me on social media and just say, hey, man, how do I get into caddying? And I just tell them, man, go back to school, please. It's a tough gig. I've been very blessed and very fortunate. If you don't know my story, how I got started caddying, it's pretty remarkable that I even am caddying, that I even got to do it the second day, even the first day. And I'd be happy to share that with y'all. But yeah, the responsibilities are really just to fill the gap. How I caddy for Scottie is way different than how I caddy for Bubba. So it's basically you're just trying to find the best way to get your horse to perform. And that's a lot of, I guess it's a lot to it because they don't really tell you, hey man, I'm negative on this shot, or I'm not feeling good about my swing. His swing Scottie Scheffler is shuffling his feet every day, so I don't know if it's going to be a good day or a bad day, And so trying to read the man and then trying to encourage him. And then also, many of you would know from being a family member, when you're a family member and you try to encourage somebody that knows your flaws, they don't want to hear what you have to say, because you're a prophet when you come out of town. Like a lot of you guys think whatever I'm saying right now is really smart, but my family would be like, boring, because they know my flaws. So I think caddying is very challenging, trying to fill those gaps, trying to read a man who also knows that you're a broken man. So it's a difficult endeavor, but it's a lot of fun. I love to try to help people support people that are going for their dreams, and I'm very honored to be able to do that.
I'm curious, is it true that when Scottie first approached you about being his caddy, you were hesitant because you didn't think it would be a good fit? In fact, I think the way you put it, I think you told him you weren't sure it would be a good fit because of his attitude. Is that true, and how did that play out? How did he convince you to come on board?
Yeah, when I got the phone call, it was basically through a mutual friend of ours. Some of y'all might know Stephen Bunn. His counterpart, Brad Payne, called me and said, hey, you're about to get a phone call from an amazing golfer, and I really think you ought to take the job. And I called my wife and said, I can't believe I'm about to start working for Tiger. This is so cool. But then Scottie called me, and I was like, oh. So that was kind of disappointing. He was only 19th in the world and hadn't won anything yet, so I was like, yeah, whatever. But no, when he called me, we happened to be his partner at the Zurich Classic. Bubba and he played together, so I got to see him in action for a week. And I could tell he was talented, but he was very frustrated on the course. And my thing was I had already caddied for 22 years or whatever, and I was basically retiring. I told Bubba I'm done. I just want to go and live my life and do something different, maybe get into ministry, something I'm passionate about. And so when I got the phone call, it was like, okay, do I come out of retirement to work for this guy? And, I had the leg up because, I didn't need to do it anymore. I'd done it for 22 years. I filled my job, my role. And so I was able to say some things to him that probably I wouldn't have said if I was a brand new caddy, and that was just really accountability, something you talk about in your book, And I think the best way we perform is when we hold each other accountable and we don't get too prideful. And so when he called me, I just said, the first thing I said to him was, do you like dad jokes? Because I'm going to tell a lot of those. And he said, I can tolerate him. And then the second thing I said to him was, basically, look, man, I don't know if I want to work for you. And he was like, what do you mean by that? And then we kind of went into, how he presents himself, and not to hold him to perfection, but just to say, I don't want to work for somebody that's just going to have a bad attitude. Can you work on it? And he said, absolutely. And then I was all in after that. So, and I want people to do the same for me. I need that in my life more than, some of you probably saw the Ryder Cup. I can get a little fired up sometimes, Sorry about that. But I need accountability. So very important.
I'm not sure if it was 2 or 3 years ago that Bubba Watson was here, in fact, sitting right where you are. And we showed up on the screen, the famous shot that he made on, I guess it was the 10th hole in a playoff. And he made it sound like it wasn't that big a deal, but from what I understand, that when I guess he hit his drive kind of straight right, that he was really kind of losing his cool, and apparently you were able to calm him down. Is that correct? Is that accurate? Tell us about that.
No, that is not accurate. Bubba was never calm. He was always fired up. If y'all have seen Bubba, man, he's stressed out on the golf course way more than, most people. Just a crazy talented man. But he kept slicing it a little too much on that hole, which is a great hole for him because he's left-hander. And it kept getting close to the trees on the left. So in the playoff, he kind of got worried and didn't commit to it and didn't cut it at all and went in the trees. And, now we get down there, and of course there's an opening, 50 yards left of the green, wide open. And who better to hit that shot than Bubba Watson? I mean, he'll hit a duck hook from the middle of the fairway. So when we got in there, I knew that it was 135 to the front, and he hits his gap wedge 135 when he hits it straight. The pin was on 30 yards. That makes it 165. And so I was like, all right, let's pick the club that would, if it was straight, go to the front, and then your hook will take it the rest. And obviously the rest is history. But the funnest part of that story was, first of all, at Augusta, nobody's better at moving the patrons out of the way and getting it prepared. And Bubba's very scared of a crowd. Like, he doesn't really like to shake hands. He doesn't like people getting behind him. He's got a lot of fears from, from his childhood. His dad was in war and stuff, and kind of, put that on him. And so Bubba was like kind of freaked out or whatever just by the crowd. But you get over there and the patrons are all out of the way and it's perfect, and he hits the shot, and I've got to take off running to get out of the patrons because if not, they're going to come in and now I'm going to be trying to fight through it, right? So I run out, and I happen to, right when I get past the trees, I see his ball land on the green and kind of spin up the hill, and I'm thinking, are we about to win the Masters? This is crazy. And so I turn to look at him like, huh? Waiting for him to see his ball, and he comes out of the trees I'm like, this is going to be sick when he sees where his ball is. And he's got this stud walk, and he looks mad as a hornet, and he sees his ball, and I'm like, and he goes, these people are touching me. Not what I expected, to be honest with you.
Well, going back to what Eric said in his email, if Scottie isn't playing well, what do you do? Do you try to encourage him? You just stay quiet? What do you try to do?
Did Eric have any advice about that? Because I'm trying to figure it out.
He did not. He did not.
I'm taking a poll after this if anybody can help me. Speaking of dad jokes, I took a poll once and 80% of the people got mad when the tent fell. Dad joke, sorry, I had to throw that in there. The thing is obviously sometimes it could be their swing, sometimes you see something in their setup, sometimes it's, you're having a bad day, and golf is a really hard game because you initiate the action every time. And, the thing that I've learned in my 26 years of observation, I tell people I'm kind of like swimming in a shark tank with sharks. I'm not a shark, so I just observe shark behavior. And what I've noticed is there's an expectation and then you have a confidence. And if the confidence is near the expectation, they'll perform well. But when their confidence drops, now all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't know if I can meet that expectation. Performance drops. So my job is to figure out, why is he not confident, or is the expectation too high? So, and what happens when you don't meet an expectation is your confidence gets even lower. So it's like this weird dynamic of you see a guy on the tour who might miss 5 cuts in a row, and then he starts talking about, well, next year I'll sell insurance because I just can't play golf anymore. Now his expectations get lowered to where his confidence is, and then he wins the next week. And you're going, how does a guy miss 5 cuts in a row and then win on the PGA Tour? Because their expectations and confidence are near each other. So with that observation over the years that I've just that's my theory, I try to look at how can I help my player to figure out whether, does he think this shot has to be perfect? If he does, let me broaden the target. Or do I need to say, have you forgotten who you are? You're the best golfer in the world, dude. I remember in the middle of his putting woes, he had a 2-footer and he missed it. And he's like, I can't putt. And I literally walked up to him. I said, okay, let me ask you this. Can you clap your hands together and move your arms back and forth? He's like, yes. And I said, then you can putt, dude. Like, come on, just relax. Like, trying to just raise his confidence to make it seem simple. So, there's a lot of little things that you're trying to do. And, probably the greatest job I've ever done in my 26 years was at the Olympics. On Friday, Scottie was feeling a lot of pressure. Why? Because he was winning everything at the time, and he was the guy. And if you think about the Olympics, it's once every 16 majors that the Olympics comes around. So it's, you feel like, I don't know how any Olympic athlete performs to do that every 4 years. That's a lot of pressure. And he was certainly striping it, hitting it great, but he was feeling that pressure. And on Friday, he actually took his putter and he threw it about 30 yards. And I was like, okay, we're in it now. Like, I got to do something, right? And then the very next hole, he like half shanked the 3-wood, then tried to hit a miracle shot, and we made a double. And it was like, okay, I definitely got to do something. And so I wrote down 3 things on my pin sheet. And I had kind of a dad talk with him. I grabbed him and said, you look at me in my eyes and you listen to every word I'm about to say, and you don't talk back. You hear me? He's like, I was like, you hear me? And I read those 3 things to him. This is what we're doing. We're doing this, this, and this. You understand? And I just tried to simplify it. And it was basically to get back to the process, because he was getting distracted from the Olympics and the medal and all this stuff, right? And so he ended up going on to start to play better that day, and that was kind of the turning point. And it was really like the best job that I've ever done to actually change, because most of the time it's really difficult that day to change someone's behavior. Once you get mad or frustrated, we all know if you've dealt with anybody in your life or your coworker or whatever, once you get to that emotional state, you're not very humble. Your pride wells up, and that's a person that you can't talk to. So I had to kind of get almost angry to talk to him. But he responded really well, because Scottie Scheffler is an incredibly humble man. And he was like, wow. And then the greatest statement that anybody's ever made to me in my entire life as a caddy was whenever we were on the driving range and Tommy missed his putt and we won the gold medal. He looked at me in my eyes. He said, Ted, there is 0 chance I would be on the podium at all if it wasn't for what you did for me on Friday. And, that's another thing that shows his humility, the fact that Scottie Scheffler is not, he's not a guy that gets up there and beats his own chest. He's always thanking his team and stuff, and he's just an incredible man. So it's a lot of fun to work with someone that has that sort of heart. And you touch on that in your book, Sam Walton at Walmart, the two stores that, were kind of doing the same thing, and one didn't succeed and one did. Why? Because one group of men were very humble in how they dealt with people and things. So, that's a huge factor in Scottie's success.
It's a great story. I appreciate that. I want to shift gears a little bit and like to maybe ask you a couple of questions about your faith. I thought we'd just start by allowing you to share with us kind of your spiritual journey and how you came to faith in Christ.
Yeah, so I grew up, we would go to church, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, sometimes on Sundays. I always believed in God, but God was kind of like a crutch. If you break your leg, you go in the garage, you get your crutches, you use them. All right, my leg's fixed, you go put them back. So God was kind of always on standby. He was a celestial Santa Claus for me. But I always had I was like, I knew what was right, I knew what was wrong. And then whenever I was when I was in college, I started dating a girl who was a Mormon, and I was seeing the Mormon missionaries go around, and I was like, wow, these guys are riding bicycles telling people about God. I need to know these people. So I got to know them, and I actually became a Mormon for a year and a half, and then I realized, like, man, I can't keep all these rules. So that was kind of like the first conviction of like, man, even though I was a decent person by the world standpoint, it's like, oh, Ted, he's a good guy, he's a good guy. And I was just like, boy, if they knew what was in my heart, man. And I didn't want to tell anybody that because everybody else was good at keeping the rules, but I knew I wasn't. I knew I was like, I can't do this. So I left that religion, and I kind of thought, well, I guess I'm just going to go to hell. Started dating my wife. She grew up in church, grew up reading the Bible. And we would have deep conversations, and I would share with her, hey, Melanie, I think you should do this. And she said, actually, the Bible says this. I'm like, wow, that's in the Bible. That's incredible. And every time I'd have this conversation, the Bible says this. And I was like, this is amazing, Well, we got engaged, and her mom was one of my least favorite people because she was always like, you need to go to church. You need to come to church. You need to come to church. I was like, I hate this lady. I'm not a bad person. Like, I can't stand you, woman. You're awful. And we got engaged, and we had like a 3-hour conversation on a Friday night. And so I was like, okay, my wife goes, my fiance at the time goes, we need to go to church. I'm like, oh, here we go. So we go to church. We sit in the back, like the sinners way back there. That's where all the sinners sit, not the saints up front. Sinners in the back. This is a free event, so I know y'all didn't pay to get up here. But anyway, sitting in the back of the church, and the message is told, and I don't really get it yet, the gospel message. And next thing you know, my fiance gets up and starts walking whenever they had an altar call, and I didn't know what that was. And so, we're in a church of people I don't know, and she's 20 feet ahead of me, and I'm thinking, man, we're engaged. I guess I should be doing whatever she's doing. So I get up and follow her up there, and now she's standing right about where you are, and they got the screen, and it's, all for Jesus high. I'm thinking, what is he saying over there? Trying to figure out what's going on in that conversation. So now he gets done with her, comes over to me, and he looks me dead in my eyes. I'm not even kidding. He goes, what are you doing up here? I said, I don't know. He goes, I can tell. Go sit back down. You talk about the walk of shame. And you guys thought hitting a golf ball out of bounds and not knowing it was out of bounds and having to walk back to the tee was embarrassing? Try going to the altar call and the pastor going, nope, I'm kicking you out. That'll whoop you. So I got denied from being a Christian. But Jesus had other plans for me. He said, the pastor said, let's meet on this Wednesday. So I went and met, and I had all kinds of questions that many of you in the audience could have today. And he never said, well, my opinion is this. He said, what's your questions you have? And I asked him, and he said, let's turn to this page and turn to that page. And he answered all my questions. And then he presented the gospel. And the first thing he told me was music to my ears. He said, do you know that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God? And I said, oh, my word, that is such good news. Because I knew in my heart that I was a broken man, that I was a sinner, that I was, even though I was trying to be good, and like you talk about in your book, like, hey, man, I'm trying to live out this life to make everybody think I'm a good person and I'm a good man. But internally, I was a wreck. And so that was the first bit of good news. And then when he told me that Jesus died on the cross for that and that I could be resurrected, I just started crying. I just started weeping. And he asked me if I wanted that. And I said, absolutely. So that day, that was in August of 2002. And so I got saved. I gave my life to the Lord. And it was interesting because I started caddying in 2000. And now my perspective started to change on the PGA Tour. When I first started caddying, it's like Freddie Couples, David Love, Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, oh my gosh. And then you start to see them as men who have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So that was how I came to faith. And since then, my perspective has shifted a ton.
I bet. Thank you. That's great. Now you have a podcast that comes out, was it every Sunday?
It's like a 6-minute message. No, it's 30 seconds. Probably.
It's become real popular around here. And I have people sending it to me all the time. And just tell me real quickly about that. What's your objective, and What are you trying to accomplish using these podcasts?
Yeah, so I noticed years ago on social media how negative it was. People have free reign to say whatever they want to say to you, and there's a lot of people that put out hate and different things, and it feels like there's a lot of keyboard warriors that can say a lot of stuff never to your face. And I thought, man, there's got to be something better to put on social media. And so one day I was just out at a tournament, and I just had an idea in my head. I just said, Sunday sermon, and I said some wisdom that I thought I had learned. And people were like, that's really cool, do it again. And I thought, whatever, And then a couple of weeks later, I did another one. And then pretty soon I just started doing them and then started to see it grow. And, zero doubt in my head, the only reason why I have the followers I have is because of what I do for a living. I don't think it's this message that I want to follow Ted Scott because he's doing Sunday sermons. I think people enjoy the Sunday sermons, but most of them are probably following because I'm Scottie Scheffler's caddy, I'm Bubba Watson's caddy. So I'm very grateful for the platform that these men and their skills have provided to give that message. But, it's really gospel light. It's just something that kind of, I have a message, whatever I feel like I'm learning or working on in my life, and then I just kind of point people to the one that can heal, that can help them in their life. And so that's what I do. And I try to keep it short because people's attention span is, they can scroll, they can last about 6 seconds according to studies. So, that's what I try to do, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's been very encouraging. A lot of people come up to me and say, hey, thank you for what you're doing, thank you for living your faith out. But, it's what we're called to do. We should be telling people about, the good news, right?
Amen. Well, I appreciate that, and, I think that a number of people, like I said, are really encouraged by it. So keep doing it.
Thank you.
Keep doing it. During the golf season, I know you travel a great deal and you're away from home a lot, and you have a lot going on. How do you stay spiritually centered during that time when you're doing a series of tournaments, week after week after week? How do you do that?
Yeah, if you think about a pot on the stove, right? You turn the heat on the stove, and the pot's cold until it gets on the heat. So you've got to get around the gospel. How do you get around the gospel? Read the word, pray, spend time with other believers, have conversations. So throughout your week, if you're only going to church on Sunday and then you're putting the stove, your pot away from the fire, you're going to go cold pretty quick, and you're not going to really have a fulfilled, blessed life. So, I understanding that, I'm trying to, first of all, make my closest friends, two of which I brought two of my best friends here today, trying to bring men that, these two men right here, I can't tell you what they are to me in my life. One, accountability partners. Two, the way that they live their life out, the way Christ lives his life out, the love that they have for every person in this room that they've never met. I'm like, it's inspiring. So when you get around people like that, guess what you want to do? You want to be like that. And so surround myself with people that love Jesus, read the word, pray, try to, what did Jesus say? Talking about humility. How did God, the creator of the universe, come to the earth, first of all, to die for us, but second of all, it said, he came not to be served, but to serve. Jesus Christ, the King of the world, came and served others. What an example that is, right? So if I'm following him, then one of the greatest ways to actually get a fulfilled life is to follow what he does, right? And be a follower of Christ. What does that mean? Well, how can I serve someone? Whether it's a volunteer that looks like he's got a frown on his face, I'm like, hey, how you doing today, sir? Everything good with you? How's your life? Maybe just, if I got a few minutes, dig into them. Or, pick up some trash on the range. Why? Not because I have to, not because I'm trying to look good, because what would Jesus do, right? So as we lived out the faith, it helps us to be encouraged. And then College Golf Fellowship, Stephen Bunn, and Brad Payne are on the tour, mostly every week, doing a Tuesday night fellowship for us, guys that, when you work for a great golfer, you don't go to church on Sunday, you play golf on Sundays, you know what I mean? We don't miss cuts, guys. Come on, I saw you back there with your negative attitude, thinking Scottie Scheffler missed cuts. You didn't do that. So we have church on Tuesday nights, and it's wonderful. And those men, if you don't know Stephen Bunn, and if you get a chance, get to know Stephen Bunn. He's an amazing man, Birmingham guy, and those men speak life into us. Matter of fact, when I was, this is a really cool God story to me. It's very impersonal, but when I was wrestling with leaving Bubba and retiring, I was having chaos in my heart, and I was calling Brad Payne every other day. I was calling my pastor. And what did Brad Payne say to me? Literally, these words came out of his mouth as I was complaining about my life. He goes, hey, get over yourself. You're not that important. I'm like, geez, I don't like this guy. That was one of the best things anybody's ever said to me, because my pride was welling up. It was all about me. And then the very next day, my pastor called me and said, man, I got a word for you. He said, make this about God and not about you. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been missing the point of this whole deal, right? So that's a wonderful endeavor that I've been able to partake in, is the men of God who walk with the tour and share with us and walk the fairways with us. It's been incredible. So they help us a lot.
Cool. That's great. You know, Jesus tells us that the storms in life are going to come our way, and that we either can build our lives on the rock or on the sand. And I know you and your family have had a real storm come into your life. Would you maybe share with us kind of how it's impacted you and how your faith has sustained you through it?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. So we were at the FedEx St. Jude, and we were coming off the golf course on August the 9th. I think we were on the 16th hole whenever my wife called Meredith, Scottie's wife, and gave her the bad news. And then when I got off the course, you know, the security was like, turn your phone on, call your wife. And for the last 2 years, our nephew has lived with us, and he's kind of grown up next door. He's 4 years younger than my son, 8 years younger than my daughter, but he's kind of like their sibling. He's like kind of like our kid. You know, we spend so much time with him. So anyway, he's lived with us, very vibrant kid. He was at his cousin's house. He's a 10-year-old kid at the time. He's 11 now. And his cousin and him were playing basketball, and they ended up, I don't know if they had an argument or whatever, but his cousin went and got a gun and shot him in the back of the head and hit his spinal cord, and he became a quadriplegic. He's on a ventilator. His mind is perfect. He can speak, he can think, but you know, right now the current medical situation is very difficult. So coming off the course and getting that phone call on Saturday, you know, when Scottie's close to winning the tournament, you know, it really puts things in perspective. First of all, you're kind of like, is this golf tournament even important? You know, what's important in life? So we rushed to, you know, back to Louisiana. Scottie and Meredith are incredibly generous. They got a plane for me. My son was actually at JH Ranch. You know, you got a lot of JH Ranch guys here. Scottie and Meredith flew my son and our two neighbors' kids home early from JH Ranch so they could be with Joel. And the biggest thing that I would say that I've learned through all of this, Richard, and this is a really important message, I would say this is probably the most important message I'm learning in my life, is that typically whenever I see the roof leaking, I'm like, let's call a roofer. If I see a problem as a caddy, it's my job to fill the gap, solve the problem. Many of you might be a manager or a business owner. It's like, you got to take care of that. Let me tell you this. Watch your 14-year-old son, you know, 3 days after this happens, at 2 a.m, sit on your couch and cry like you've never heard a human being cry, and try to fix that. I'm looking at him going, I have nothing for my kid. There's nothing I can tell him right now that'll take away that pain. Try talking to your wife for 90 days. She cries every day. Try to solve that problem. My daughter, very close to my nephew, cries all the time. My nephew's mom, dealing with all this, cries, this, that, struggles. Now let's talk about my nephew, the one going through it. You know, a kid that was the best athlete in every team he was on and loved to play outside and very vibrant. So now what's my message? Like, what do I do? The only thing I can do, that's turn to the one that can heal him. Because in this situation, the situation is not going to get better. So there's nothing I can say like, oh, things will get better, you know, do therapy or whatever. It's like, no. So how am I going to find peace? Well, pretty cool. God says you will find the peace that surpasses understanding. How? Casting your cares on him. You know, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, things like that. So I've learned through this situation that there's nothing I can do to gain peace myself other than look to the one that is the peace giver, the peacemaker. And so if I do that, then I can take them and say, hey guys, I know this is really hard, but listen, I promise you, you can still have peace no matter your circumstances if you'll turn and look and depend on the one that gives you peace despite your circumstances. So that is the message.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you had contemplated retirement, I guess 4 years ago, and you're still caddying, and you've caddied for 26 years, apparently, and you're 51, is that right? 52? What's next for you? I mean, have you given much thought to that? Because you have thought about retiring from caddying. What's your plan?
Well, I love to teach golf. Is Eric retiring anytime soon? Because I really like to work here. This is a nice looking, greens look good out there, so nice group of people. So basically, when I was retiring, I was going to go full-time coaching. You know, I had a pretty good staff of young people that I work with. Matter of fact, I'm really proud to say that one of the kids that I've worked with for a while She just got her LPGA Tour status, so I'm pretty pumped about that. So I love helping people achieve their dreams, and I love speaking life into people. So my two passions are really just kind of helping people in life and ministry. So I was thinking, hey, what a great way to do that by coaching golf. It's something I have experience in, coaching people in golf and in life. And I would say I'm way more of a life coach to the people, because if you see my swing, the dip and flip, you'll hit it left every time. If you want to take out the right side of the course, come see me afterwards. I'll teach you the dip and flip. Never goes to the right. So maybe you don't want me teaching you your swing, but so I speak a lot of life into my students, and I'm very passionate about that. So that was what I was going to pursue. But now that I'm working for Scottie, God's amazingly given me a larger platform to do that very thing. So, I told Scottie when I started working for him that I would commit to do it until I'm 55 and reevaluate. And so, we'll see how it goes. If he keeps playing well, I'll probably keep doing it. If not, see you, sucker. I met a young man. Where you at, young man? Raise your hand. Where's he at? My little guy. He's in here somewhere. He went to school. Tell him to come to the Ted Scott Golf School. We don't need that other education stuff. Little man came up and showed me a swing. I was like, I'm going to work for you one day, kid. That's beautiful. He's awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. I was going to suggest you're very gifted as a speaker. I think that some type of ministry would be a good fit for you. Of course, that's up to God's leading. But why don't you come work for the center?
Hey, that's it.
We have an office in Memphis. We could have one in Louisiana, and just kidding. But if you're interested, we would certainly talk to you.
I start at 10% and go from there. So. Scottie pays me tithing.
Yeah.
Dad joke, sorry. 10%. Anybody?
Final question. And there's two parts to this. There are a lot of young men that are here, and they want to come hear you. And most of them are golfers. And you have some, like the young man that you met, the 10-year-old that you met, they'd love to be as best as they could be. What do you tell a young person who really wants to be a good golfer?
It's a journey, right? Just like life. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail, and if you get caught up in the results, you'll just be discouraged. So I like the saying better every day. That's one thing that Scottie is the best golfer in the world, and he literally loves to go to work and try to get better. And I think, man, what a drive he has, but you fall in love with the process, and the rest of it takes care of itself. Life is going to hit you hard. One of my friends that I met over the years, he makes surfboards. And he said that every surfboard starts with the same piece of foam, just a big rectangle piece of foam. But he can make a long board, a short board, and board for this wave, for that wave. And he said, Ted, you should see my garage. He goes, every tool I have in my garage is abrasive to this foam, every one. Why? Because that's kind of like life, right? God's going to shape you, sand you, grind on you to turn you into something beautiful, like a surfboard that can surf a wave. It's made for a specific purpose. And golf is like that, right? It's like, hey, if you're on a journey to get better every day, you understand you're going to take licks, you're going to miss a cut, you're going to shoot 80, you're going to choke on the last few holes, you're going to cry, you're going to, but at the same time, look at Scottie, he went through the putting woes, and now he's, top 20 or whatever. You have to stick with it and keep going and just try to get better every day. And I think if you do that, you'll have a life that you'll look back and say, man, I really enjoyed that process and have a lot of fun doing it.
And then what would you tell them, and not even only them, but all of us, tell us how Christ has made a real difference in your life.
Yeah, like I said, going through those bumps and those, grinds and those things like that, and especially with what I'm going through now with our nephew, you realize very quickly how fleeting good news and bad news is, because we have to move on. Joel's new life is what it is now. So we can't, I was talking with my son the other day, and he's like, I wish I could play with Joel again, just play outside one more time. And I said, buddy, let's be very grateful for those times, but let's also focus on, hey, where is Joel now? We have today. We don't have yesterday. And so the biggest thing that I would say that if you put Jesus at the center of your life, it just makes life much easier to deal with because the licks are coming. You know, ups and downs are going to hit you. They're going to punch you in the mouth. I love the Mike Tyson saying, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. You know, that's so true, right? It's like, whoa, where did this come from? And so if you don't have something greater than that circumstance to focus on, you're going to have a difficult life. And, you know, the other thing that I love is like, what is our purpose? Why are we here? Are we here to hit a golf ball in the hole? And can everybody be the best golfer? No. It's only one of those. And I don't know if y'all know who Lecrae is, but Bubba had a concert, and Lecrae won a Grammy, and Bubba had a little concert, charity concert, and Lecrae was the best guy, the number one artist or whatever. And we were backstage, and I said, Lecrae, tell me what's the hardest thing about being number one, in the music industry. And he said, the hardest thing about being number one is that when you're on top of the mountain, everybody wants you to kick the next guy off the top of the mountain so you can stay on top. And he said, I don't enjoy that. He said, the best part was when I was down there with everybody else kind of moving in the same direction. And so I think, when you're a follower of Jesus, you're kind of all looking to the peak and saying, one day Jesus is going to resurrect me. That's where I'm heading. And that's where the fun is, the fun of life, right? But being number one, there's a lot of miserable people that are successful. Number one. One more quick story. Larry Fitzgerald, the receiver, Hall of Fame receiver, I saw him at a tournament. He and Bubba were friends. And I said, Larry, how's retirement going? And he said, buddy, my life is so good. And I said, why? And he goes, well, I've just been fortunate to make great relationships along the way. He goes, but I know so many guys that have retired and they have all the money and fame in the world and they're miserable. And I think a life without Christ and a life without fellowship is a miserable life. And so that's how God's affected me. He's put great men like Steve and DK in my life. And it's just been a beautiful thing to walk together side by side with men who are following Jesus. And, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not for that trophy, a gold medal, any
That's
of that.
cool. I appreciate that. Usually when we end one of these events, I share some words of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7. They're very powerful. They kind of confront every person that reads it. But he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. And what he's saying is, whether if you think you're going to heaven because you go to church, because you believe in Jesus, or because you have lived a good life, he's saying doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to go to heaven. And then he says, on that day, and he's talking about the judgment day, he said, many will say to me, but Lord, I did this, and Lord, I did that. I did all these good works. I gave a lot of money away. And Jesus says, and then I will say to them, I never knew you. Depart from me. And so I share this because that's really what a Christian is, someone that knows Jesus and has a relationship with him. And my question to you this morning as we leave, do you know him? Do you have that relationship with him? Or could we possibly hear those words one day, depart from me because I never knew you? And I just share this to invite you, if the answer is no, you don't have a relationship with him, or you're just not really sure, I invite you to go through the investigative study. I can't tell you how helpful it has been to so many men, and all you have to do is mark that on the card, and we'll be in touch with you. I spend a good bit of my time meeting with men. I'm meeting with a guy today at 2 o'clock I'm going through this investigative study with. So I'd love to go through it with you. And I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to close with prayer. Then you can give Scott an applause and you can leave. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time together. What an encouraging message we heard. Thank you for Ted Scott and just his life. Pray that you would continue to bless him. I pray your blessing on each of these men, on their marriages, their families, and their work. We're very grateful for just your goodness and just for all the ways in which you've blessed us. We pray all of this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Y'all been great.